Chapter 5, Moonlight. The emotional end of the night left Sierra restless. Upon waking for a third time, she groaned and reached out beside the mattress, patting the floor in an effort to find her phone. Eventually, she found it, and upon seeing the time on the screen, 2 a.m., wished she hadn't. Great, she thought. I'm gonna feel like hell in the morning. Donning an overly long black tank that covered her human half fully, Sierra headed to the kitchen for a drink. As soon as she stepped into the living area, her body seized up. It was dark, but Sierra's ability to detect heat in the absence of light immediately alerted her to nearby danger. Someone was on the back deck. In that moment, Sierra would have been nearly unrecognizable. Her pupils constricted to thin slits as she raised herself up to nearly 9 feet tall, baring her fangs. She held her clawed arms out to her side, ready to use them to kill if need be. If she was lucky, the intruder would be unaware that liminals weren't allowed to attack humans. If she was even luckier, the intruder would be a liminal, and she wouldn't have to hold back at all. As she reached the glass door and grabbed its handle, the entity turned around, jumping slightly. "Sierra?" Immediately, the echidna sank down and relaxed her muscles. On the other side of the glass was Leaf, who had been looking out over the lake in the night. Sierra breathed a sigh of relief. "Gods, Leaf, you scared the hell out of me. I thought there was an intruder. I'm so sorry. I didn't frighten you, did I?" The blonde gave a soft smile. "Only a little. It's okay. Come on out." Sierra slithered onto the deck, her tail closing the door behind her. The night was still, with not a sound to be heard past the chirping of insects and some nocturnal birds. The two of them shared the silence for a moment, until eventually Leaf spoke. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Sierra nodded silently. She couldn't argue it in the least. The moon's reflection on the surface of the lake was nearly hypnotizing. As she looked over the water, her tail swayed gently on the deck behind them. "It really is." She felt Leaf's head rest on her shoulder. "Thank you for trying to cheer me up earlier, too." Sierra smiled, rubbing her back affectionately. "Of course. I told you I got you, remember? And sorry again for scaring you." Her apology drew a giggle from Leaf's lips. "It's okay. You're quite the predator in the darkness," she praised. "Did I look like prey?" Sierra grinned, showing her sharp teeth. "You did a bit. Bright-eyed and raw and definitely helpless," she teased. Honestly, who could blame a carnivore for confusing the two? Sierra lifted herself up another foot or so to look more intimidating. "Oh yeah?" Leaf said playfully, raising an eyebrow and meeting her eyes with a smirk. Her voice carried unspoken words along with it. "Prove it." She felt Sierra's tail slowly begin to coil around her, starting below her knees and continuing upward around her waist and arms. Not tightly, of course, but just enough to keep her secure. Sierra looked down at her restrained host and extended a gentle claw, lifting Leaf's chin up to meet her gaze as she smirked. "Yeah." The shift in Leaf's expression was both subtle and gradual. As fierce red eyes stared into her, she felt breathless. So much so, in fact, that she could only think to whisper the same response. "Oh, yeah?" Sierra was close enough to feel the trembling in the girl's breath. "Yeah." As their lips met, Leaf let out a quiet whimper. Gradually, she felt Sierra's tail recede, and for a moment the impulse crossed her mind to pull away. She had to pull away. It was wrong. Instead, she found herself surrendering to the viper's charm, her hand grasping at Sierra's shirt pleadingly once freed. After a few minutes, they parted, and Leaf found Sierra looking into her eyes once more. This time, her expression was gentle. "Should we go back inside?" she breathed quietly. Leaf's mind screamed at her to refuse, to turn her away and go to bed, pretend nothing happened. Instead, she felt herself shyly nodding. As Leaf entered her homestay's bedroom, she was surprised to find that there was no actual bed. By this point, Sierra had disassembled the bed frame entirely and moved it into the closet, preferring a setup much lower to the ground. Sierra gave an assuring smile as she slid past, then paused. Leaf looked not only shy, but uncomfortable. "Are you okay, kid? I'm not pressuring you, am I?" Leaf looked to the ground. She didn't feel pressured, but she also didn't want to risk everything so quickly. If something happened, if they slept together, there was a chance Thompson would find out, and if she did, Leaf could be arrested and Sierra likely deported. Quietly, she tried to articulate her thoughts. "You're not, promise. I'm just nervous and scared and worried." She could probably rattle off countless other feelings as well. Sierra nodded and slid over to the mattress on the floor, curling her lower half beneath her. "Let's talk, then." The two of them settled in, and Leaf explained the concerns that ran through her mind. How Sierra was amazing to have around, and that she felt protected by her, how she was terrified of that breaking bad so quickly. How it hadn't even been that long, but Thompson finding out could be the end for both of them. Sierra understood all of it without being upset or offended. Her blunt nature helped in that regard, it seemed. There was no time for misconstrued feelings. Leaf felt the words continue to pour from her mouth. "I'm sorry, I know it's a lot, and I should have said that while we were outside, but I was scared and flustered, and nobody's ever really looked at me like that or treated me like that, ever. And I just don't want to disappoint you or freak you out because I'm different, and..." Leaf couldn't stop herself from spilling more and more until she felt Sierra's arm on her own in an attempt to calm her down. She felt like she was going to cry at any second. "Because you're different?" She laughed softly. "Leaf, have you seen me? I'm a 20-foot-long girl with a snake tail and scaly arms. People being scared of me was half of my fear with the exchange program, and it still happens sometimes. You're a regular human. You're not going to freak me out." Leaf grew quiet. Her next words were chosen carefully. "I'm not, though. People like me aren't exactly well-liked in a lot of places." Sierra rubbed her arm affectionately. Leaf didn't mind the roughness of her palm at all. It was the intent that mattered. She swallowed. "Guess it had to happen eventually." "I wasn't born like this. I'm trans. So, yeah, I'm different from other girls, and so is my body." It took a second for Sierra to grasp the meaning behind the word, as serpentines were all female, but other sentences clued her in pretty quickly, and then she felt awful. The reason Leaf was so insecure when she saw her in the bath, why her parents kicked her out, leaving her struggling to find a home until she was saved by her older sister, while Sierra's offer of stripping down to get comfortable seeing each other was so adamantly refused, why she was afraid to be intimate. To her, Leaf looked like any other human girl, but Leaf didn't feel normal around others at all. Now that Sierra knew, she couldn't stand to think of how much the girl had been hurting. "That's why Miss Thompson wanted to put us together," she said softly to herself. Leaf turned to look at her questioningly. She had no idea what was meant by this. Understanding the expression on her face, Sierra continued. "Do you remember what I said on the dock? How even if someone likes snake girls, they expect something beautiful, delicate, and feminine when they meet one? We're both outliers." She felt a soft hand on her own as Leaf looked up to meet her eyes, smiling. There was a sadness in her expression, but with an odd note of comfort. "I guess you're right, huh?" The two of them sat on the mattress, bathed in the moonlight that shone in through Sierra's windows as their hands gently caressed each other's. "If it's okay with you," Leaf began, "I think I'd prefer to keep things platonic right now. I like you protecting me, and I like how you look at me, but I also want you to be able to stay, and for someone like me, intimacy is pretty scary. I'm so sorry. Sierra nodded. She could tell that it was hard for Leaf to be so open. You don't have to apologize at all. I get it, and it's no trouble. But if there's anything I can do to make you comfortable, I'll do it. She had more or less intended tonight's flirtations to be purely physical, so there were no hard feelings on her end in the least. With a kind smile, Sierra tried to assuage the girl beside her by ending on a high note. That said, if you want to stay here with me tonight for company's sake, you're more than welcome to. I won't try any funny business, she teased. Leaf responded with a touched smile. I'd like that. Not long after, the two had fallen asleep on the mattress, with Sierra's tail wrapped protectively around her host. I won't let anyone hurt you, the serpent thought before drifting off.